Good evening. Thank you for joining us as we discuss part two of Wannabes and Stolen Valor. We ran out of time, or grew some extra slides last time, so we're going to be talking about Wannabes and Stolen Valor again here on the Lessons of Vietnam show, watched all around the world. The Lessons of Vietnam show is broadcast from the studios of Nissan Communications in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they are gracious to give us the chance to tell the real story of the Vietnam War and those who served. And just so you know that you're new to the show, I'm your host, Bill Dixon, Vietnam veteran, 1967-68. I was stationed at a place called Long Binh. It was right outside of Bien Hoa Air Base, and 90th replacement for you out there that went to Vietnam, went through 90th replacement, about 20 miles north of Saigon. So we're looking forward to getting started on the show tonight, and we're going to get right into it, make sure we get everything in tonight. So, as you see there on the screen, we encourage you to take part. If you guest dial 919-518-9773 or Computers 2K Voice on Skype. Come in, make comments, take part of the show, give your opinion. If you were a Vietnam vet, if you've met one of these wonderful stolen valor wannabes out there and you want to tell us all about it so we can all get a good laugh. Someone sent me one yesterday, and the guy was wearing a brown uniform. He was a colonel. He was a POW. He was a tunnel rat. He had his own CIA card, and he had a Special Forces and SEAL card. So he hit all the bases just as nice as he could be, though. As we always talk about, there's the Veterans Crisis Line there. There's a lot of veterans out there who need someone to talk to, and if you're a veteran or know someone, please reach out to them and help them with these numbers. Uh, Sometimes just talking to another vet or talking to somebody else who been there, done that, it always helps. This is our first slide, and this is I thought I just found this one, and it's a guy who does some fantastic cartoons. He's a Vietnam vet, and it says, "In country, 50 years ago, did you ever think someone would want to be a Vietnam vet?" And here's the guy showing these kids his all of his badges. He says, "I got this one for killing 200 NVA regulars after escaping the Dang Bang POW camp. Any questions?" And this guy next to him is saying, "Yeah, I got a couple Westmorelands," and which is no such thing, but the good example of wannabes and stolen valor, part two. So we're going to go into the chairwoman of the POW network has investigated hundreds of cases in which people's lofty claims about their military services turn out to be false. It is to make sure our military history and their lives lost to fight for freedom, to make sure these things are accurately told," she said. "These liars are changing military history, and if you think about it, 50 to 100 years from now, what's going to be able to figure out the truth or a lie? Who's going to be able to figure out the truth or a lie?" We look back on the American Civil War, and it's up in the air right now. Vietnam has been compared to the Civil War as far as people misunderstanding and so forth. We're running into a lot of that now, and in just a matter of time before the Vietnam War, especially when these people are out there spreading their garbage and so forth. "Stolen valor takes away from those who spill blood, and in some cases, their lives," she said. You have to excuse my voice a little bit. I have been attacked by the crud in my sinuses. So if I lose my voice, I'll try to get something to take care of it. We talked a little bit about this book on the last show, but I highly encourage you to go out there and read it. I read mine. I tried to find it and realized that I had loaned it to somebody, and they forgot to loan it back to me, and I forgot who I loaned it to. Stolen Valor, how the Vietnam generation was robbed of its heroes and its history, by B.G. Burkett and Glenn Whitney. He's out of Texas. "For 30 years, which is now 50, we have heard that we Vietnam veterans are losers. We are so spaced out on drugs and haunted by nightmares of killing babies that we cannot hold a job or a relationship. We're a large portion of the prison and homeless population." I know all of you heard that. "Most of us suffer from post-traumatic stress and exposed to Agent Orange. So are all unpredictably dangerous and should be avoided. TV, movies, some veteran groups, and even the Veterans Administration have reinforced this with some of the things they've done. So that's the unfortunately, some of that stuff is still around. It has changed a lot since over the years, but some of it's still out there that uh, all these things and so forth. Guess what? It's not true. Most of them had a gut feeling for a long time that this was not true because it did not individually fit. When I came home from Vietnam, I almost believed this garbage because I stayed away from anybody that said they were a Vietnam vet for probably 20 years. But because we have avoided other Vietnam veterans, we have no confirmation. After all, no self respecting Vietnam vet would want to be associated with these losers we hear about from the news media. And I was guilty of that myself. Uh, like most of us, Vietnam veteran B.J. Burkett, who we talked about writing a book, grew up hearing about the heroics of World War II and experienced firsthand the respect our fathers, uncles, cousins, and neighbors received from our families, communities, and country. You know, we've heard the greatest generation. Most of our heroes were combat veterans, some of which we had met or knew personally. When our turn came to serve our country, we did it willingly and with pride. But things were different for us. The post Vietnam society we endure is nothing at all like the post World War II society. Burkett spends 692 pages dispelling the myths of the Vietnam War and its veterans. Yes, it's 692 pages, but don't let it scare you. It's broken up in parts, so you can read a little bit now and a little bit later. I know some of you out there hadn't read anything more than 100 pages, but try it anyway. You'll think you'll enjoy it. It's got lots of pictures. He describes in great detail how Valor was stolen based on his meticulous research done over 10 years. With the help of award winning investigative reporter Glenna Whitley, Burkett described how the fakes, wannabes, and exaggerators have tainted and tarnished our reputation with the willing help of news media. Sloppily and poorly researched stories have allowed phony Vietnam veterans to establish a post Vietnam culture that painted an untrue picture of the world to the public. And we've had some of that recently, which we'll talk about. Burkett's research indicates that as many as 90% of these news media appointed representatives never even served in Vietnam. Uh, Glenna Whitley, I just saw the guy's picture down there with his medals. Um, Glenna Whitley writes in the preface, but Stolen Valor is a story of hundreds of thousands of Vietnam veterans who served their country honorably only to see their efforts and sacrifice denigrated and tarnished. I thank them for their willingness to serve, and I believe Burkett's work will stand as an important watershed in the understanding of the Vietnam War and its impact of those who fought it. Now, there's several other sources that you go out and check on Wannabes. According to Whitley, the fact is, Vietnam veterans, real Vietnam veterans, are among the most successful generation of warriors in the nation's history. The popular image of the permanently traumatized Vietnam vet per- perpetuated by fakes adept at capitalizing on the public image is so wrong that it almost amounts to a parody. And if they want to look at a parody, that guy is a parody himself. So Burkhead has uncovered a much larger story, an immense public fraud, almost completely overlooked by the press and historians and other alleged experts of the Vietnam War. I like the word alleged experts. As related to Whitley, those who fought it were neither particularly young nor disadvantaged, nor overwhelmingly black or brown, nor apt to abuse drugs in the jungle or to return home as emotionally devastated misfits. I have heard that the black soldier who served honorably was nothing but cannon fodder, and there was more of them killed for so long, and it's not the truth. If you just do a little bit of research, you'll find that the black man served. Vietnam was the first really integrated war. The black man served honorably, but the percentage of black men and women in the United States is about the same percentage if you look at those who were killed. So there was not any discrepancy there. Just the opposite, in fact, has been the case. Vietnam vets have fared as well or better than any other generation of warriors and can continue to make important, positive contributions to the nation. In effect, they have been slandered. Burkett's massive investigations reveal a silent conspiracy among both individuals and institutions eager to advance their various agendas and indifference to the war, which long since became the first casualty of the Vietnam War. The myth of the Vietnam veteran as a social misfit, Burkett believes, has been perpetuated by the liars and wannabes who have seized on Vietnam either as an excuse for their problems or as a way to add color to their otherwise drab lives. In their efforts, the fakers have been aided and abetted by the VA, veterans advocates, and the mental health care industry. Not only do they denigrate fighting men who are among the finest America ever produced, but also monetary cost has been enormous for American taxpayers. Even today, the Veterans Administration often does not check the records of those who claim to suffer from maladies caused by Vietnam, even though it's patently clear from Burkett's research that many of these who make the claim never came within spitting distance of Southeast Asia. Now, we talked a little bit about some of those on the last show about this guy that got 750 some $1,000 out of the VA for uh, jobs. He was a contractor, and he couldn't probably find Vietnam on the map, let alone been a Vietnam vet. But the deeper harm may be to our understanding of our own history. The images of those who fought in Vietnam, so poorly educated, reluctant draftees, predominantly poor whites and minorities, is not true. During the Vietnam War, 7 million men volunteered for the military. Only 2 million were drafted. Let me read that again. During the Vietnam War, 7 million men volunteered for the military and only 2 million were drafted. Goes against all we've heard, isn't it? Burkett's research indicated that 75% of those who served in Vietnam itself were volunteers. They were the best educated and most okay. Now that's one of them educated words. Egalitarian. Okay, that's Amnon who tells me how to pronounce words says egalitarian. So if that's not right, blame him. Military forces in American history in World War II, only 45% of the troops had high school diploma. During the Vietnam War, almost 80% of those who enlisted had high school diplomas, and the percentage was higher for draftees, even though at the time only 65% of military age youths had a high school degree. The stereotype holds that those who died in Vietnam were disproportionately Black and Hispanic. About 5% of those killed in action were identified as Hispanic, and 12.5% were Black, making both minorities slightly underrepresented in their proportion of draft age males in the national population, which is what I already said, but he did it better. When asked by Burkett, most people guessed that the thousands of 18-year-old Black draftees died in Vietnam. In reality, only 7 of the killed in action matches that description. 18-year-old Black draftees, 7 of them. Other common negative images of the soldier in Vietnam is that he smoked pot and shot up with heroin to dull the horrors of combat. And all the movies I've seen, there's always a whole group of them smoking pot through their barrels of their rifles and so forth. And it didn't always happen that way. However, except for the last couple of years of the war, drug usage among American troops in Vietnam was lower than for American troops stationed outside the war zone. And when drug abuse rates started to rise in 1971 and 1972, almost 90% of the men who fought in Vietnam had already come and gone. A study after the war showed that use of illegal drugs among those who went to war and those who stayed at home be about the same. You got to remember, these people who got drafted or went into Vietnam, they were back here. So whatever they did back here, if they were on drugs here, there's a good chance they were on drugs when they got to Vietnam. Of the 5,000 men who deserted U.S. military for various causes during the 10 years of the war, only about 250 did so while attached to units in Vietnam. So of the 5,000 who deserted, 250 of them were actually Vietnam soldiers. Only 24 deserters attributed their action to the desire to avoid hazardous duty. And 97% of Vietnam veterans receive honorable discharges, exactly the same rate for the military as a peaceful 10 years prior to the war. After the war ended, reports began to circulate of veterans so depraved from their war experience that they turned to crime. While with estimates of the number of incarcerated Vietnam veterans as high as 1/4 of the prison population. But these estimates relied on the self reporting of criminals, and they wouldn't lie. In every major study of Vietnam veterans where the military records were verified, a statistically insignificant number of prisoners were found to be Vietnam veterans. I found over the years that quite often the Army field jacket is given out to the homeless or so forth, and not that homeless are criminals, but just about anybody that could get a field jacket, and that automatically made them veterans when somebody asked. I mean, if you got a guy that thinks you're going to be able to get a handout, and you ask him if he's a veteran because he's wearing a jacket, there's a good chance he's going to say yes to get that handout. So that's why a lot of the people who were claimed to be Vietnam vets, this is what the show's about. Some of these people claim to be Vietnam vets for whatever benefit or whatever they got out of it, said they were. So Burkett research has been featured on 2020, Reader's Digest, Vietnam Magazine. He has exposed public officials, murderers, and veteran organizations officials as fake and wannabes. He illustrates how billions of dollars of tax money is being squandered on fakes and exaggerators. Wow, Hudson. This book is a milestone in post-Vietnam War society and should be required reading for everyone impacted by the Vietnam War, especially Vietnam veterans. Burkett feels a public list of heroes of the Vietnam War would greatly diminish those claiming phony heroism. As a result, for the first time, a list of Distinguished Service Cross recipients are listed in appendix in his book, as well as a list of Medal of Honor. Now, if you don't know what Distinguished Service Cross is, that is the medal. If you do not get the Medal of Honor, you probably will get the Distinguished Service Cross, the Air Force Cross, and the Navy Cross recipients. The appendix also includes a list of U.S. military POWs who returned alive. Now, this is our latest wannabe. Heartbreaking viral news. Native American. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I know that mentally there's enough of us. Let me see if I can do that again. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I know that mentality of there's enough of us. We can do this. Y'all remember seeing him all over the TV and the news and so forth? This was the Native American Vietnam vet who was beating the drums. It went viral everywhere. Okay. Remember the young man there smiling? This is an example of stolen valor and media bias. The media were loudly proclaiming that racist white young males had attacked and ridiculed Nathan Phillips, a Native American Vietnam War veteran. Now, I wonder if that young man was wearing something besides that red hat with Make America Great Again, if this would have been gotten out of hand like it did. I have a feeling it would have either way. But if the picture there looks like that young man standing right there in that guy's face, giving him a hard time. But it was actually, he was part of the Indian there was part of or Native American, was part of the group that was creating the problem. These young men just went to go see what the noise was about. That story started to unravel quickly as more steady minds started to look into the event. The first thing was that the boys were a group from a Catholic church school from Kentucky. Next thing to come out was that he was not being intimidated. He was the one who walked through the crowd of teens, beating on his drums, singing until he stopped inches from a young man. The obscenities and shouts reported were coming from a radical crowd never shown on the news. It was already known that Native American activist Nathan Phillips was not a Vietnam veteran, as the media had repeatedly misreported. Reporters were under the impression that because in multiple interviews, Phillips had always strongly implied without coming right out and saying it. And although the media has misrepresented his military records for years, he never bothered to correct the record until he was called on it. In other words, he was a fake. When Phillips' military records showed that he had not served in Vietnam, most of the media, left, right, and center, reserved judgment on whether Phillips' previous claims constituted a clear just of stolen valor without concrete evidence, and that was the right thing to do. Snopes did a half-hearted fact check and didn't find evidence that Phillips had mischaracterized his service. Phillips, in the past, had made claims of being a recon ranger and a Vietnam Times veteran who came home and was spit on and called a baby killer, even though his service record shows that he had 0 deployments and never left the United States. Phillips, who has 3 AWOLs, that's absent without leaves, on his record, was assigned as a 1161 refrigerator technician and discharged as a private after 4 years of service. It's almost impossible to spend 4 years in the military and get out as a private. I guess those AWOLs got in his way, but a recon ranger refrigerator technician. You got to watch those refrigerators; they're tough. Snopes is refusing to set the record straight about Nathan Phillips, the Native American at the center of the Covington High School student controversy. Snopes continued to call Phillips' false claims to be unproven, despite ample evidence that he lied. As a David Collar's Pete Hansen notes, Snopes fact-checked incorrectly labeled it unproven that Phillips had falsely claimed to be a Vietnam veteran. Snopes declined to change its misleading ruling despite the definite video evidencing of Phillips doing exactly that.
You know why?
Well, Snopes has been known to be a little bit on the left side.
You know who owns Snopes? George Soros.
George Soros. Okay, that's good. A lot explained right there. Sorry, all my liberal watchers out there. Okay. Now, it's went viral, and just people were having a whole heart attack, and in Hollywood, of course, they went crazy. These kids just were terrible. And this is Alyssa Milano and other celebrities are not backing down on their criticism of the MAGA hat, Make America Great Again hat teens, who allegedly harassed a Native American during an Indigenous Peoples rally on Saturday, despite one of the high school students denying any wrongdoing. And this is what she had to say. Alyssa Milano, at Miss Milano, downscore Milano. Let's not forget, this entire event happened because a group of boys went on a school-sanctioned trip to protest against women's rights to her body and reproductive health care. It is not debatable that bigotry was at play from the start, which got nothing to do with the whole concept, I don't think, one way or the other. And Deborah Messing says they were mocking maggots. She called those young men mocking maggots. Okay. And I am absolutely disgusted by the mass of student disrespectful and vile treatment towards Nathan and Native Americans in general. Bigotry is bigotry. It's bigotry. It's bigotry. It should always be recognized and condemned. Those students could learn a thing about respect from him, Meghan McCain. Okay. We won't go worry about it. The respect she could learn from them. Stolen valor has its collateral damages. The young man, a student at the Catholic school, received life-threatening threats. The Catholic church and school received threats as a result of the unsubstantiated report, and the pictures went viral on social media and is reported by the Washington Post. Currently, the young man and his family are presently suing the Washington Post for $250 million because it was just nobody bothered to take time to get the facts. Of course, they didn't bother to get the facts because they knew what the facts were, but it didn't fit into their agenda. Now here's I always liked his movies. Actor Brian Donaghy, lying is very different. Actor Brian Donaghy's lying is very different. According to to B.G. Burkett's book, Stolen Valor, for whom the act is named, Dennehy was a Marine from 1959 to 1963, but claimed he was in Vietnam and wounded in combat. In 1998, he finally told a newspaper, I lied about serving in Vietnam, and I'm sorry. It's probable he did it to create the impression he was a tough guy like his roles. Still in 2007, he again claimed to have served in Vietnam while talking to a Wall Street Journal reporter. Brian, you could have gone in my place. In reality, Dennehy's only Vietnam action was on screen in A Rumor of War. He was an actor in the movie A Rumor of War. Good book, by the way, in which he both portrayed a Marine gunny sergeant. While Dennehy did serve in the Marines, he was not in Vietnam. His only combat duty was playing football in Okinawa in 1962. You wonder why a not successful movie has to do it. I love this guy. Stolen Valor. Former Marine, never served in Vietnam. He didn't see combat. He didn't win a Silver Star. It's an issue at the forefront of the veterans community by Davis Clifford. Mr. Clifford investigated this man. You can see all the awards and so forth. John J.J. Lavoie enjoyed an honorable career of more than 20 years in the United States Marines. This man served 20 years as a Marine. Okay? Honorably served. You can't get much better than that. Though the retired master sergeant never stepped foot on Vietnamese soil, he had a solid service record for which he could be proud. So why? So why Lavoie frequently and publicly sported a slew of medals he never earned, including the Silver Star, that's the third highest medal, the Bronze Star with Valor, that's the V for Valor. You can get a Bronze Star just for basically serving and doing a good job, but you also get the Bronze Star with the V device because you were in combat. It's Purple Heart, and it's anybody's guess why he did it. The issue of stolen valor has risen to the forefront in the military and veterans community. Photos and videos of those caught fraudulently wearing uniforms of military awards regularly make the rounds on veterans' websites and Facebook feeds, prompting disdain and anger among those who serve. Stolen valor is especially important to them because many new friends who died earning the same medals impossible wear dishonestly. In a few incidents, schemers actually use their phony stories to obtain lucrative government jobs and contracts. One man, William E. Clark, even managed to land himself as a job as a head of security at the Palisades nuclear power plant in Covert, Michigan. Now, you would think a guy that was head of security would have been checked out pretty good, wouldn't you? Oh, you would think. I mean, he's head of a nuclear plant. When Bob Adahelm first noticed Lavoie's, the first thing that struck him was the stack of awards and badges bristling on the retired Marine's chest. The two were at a ceremony to award a member of Bishop Kennedy's New Jersey ROTC with a college scholarship that last year. The Jacksonville Semper Fidelis Society, which Adelhelm founded, was presenting a scholarship to a cadet. Lavoie was there as well, representing the American Legion. He looked like a mini Chesty Puller. Chesty Puller is the Marines' Marine. Chest full of medals there, and he earned every one of them. He was a tough man. He looked like a mini Chesty Puller, Adelhelm said, referencing the famous Marine who earned 5 Navy crosses, fighting for generals in South America to the Pacific Islands in World War II and eventually Korea. Adelhelm didn't think much of it. He knew from his own 23 career as a Marine officer that many Marines returned from Vietnam highly decorated and all the ribbons and badges were correctly placed, almost. A few weeks later, at the rededication of the American Legion's Eternal Flame at Evergreen Cemetery, the two met again. Now, if you remember, the gentleman was representing the American Legion. The American Legion also has a criteria to be a member that you have to have a DD-214, and it has to be submitted to the department. When I got closer to him, I thought I saw a V on his silver star, Alham said, so I snapped a picture. The silver star, as a retired lieutenant colonel knew, is already an award for valor. A V device signifying a particular act of valor on lesser awards like the Bronze Star isn't attached to a Silver Star. There's only two people I know of who have a Silver Star with a V device. This gentleman and a gentleman by the name of John Kerry. He has a Silver Star with a V device. Tony DiLeo, the president of the Jacksonville chapter of Vietnam Veterans of America, also noticed something else. A Vietnam service ribbon. Diallo would know he earned 3 Purple Hearts and fought in the battles of Quezon Son and Way City. So things were starting to get a little hairy for the guy. For months, Alahelm festered and stewed over what he saw. This past time, when he went back to Bishop Kenny, I was waiting for him, and he showed up dressed the same way in his dress blues. Alahelm said, I confronted him. I went up to him and said, you know, you don't wear a V device on a Silver Star. Lavoy told him this was the way it was awarded to him. Okay. Alahelm said, I beg to differ with you. He told Lavoy, I had 23 years in the Marine Corps. I know a little bit about awards. A Silver Star is an award for valor. You don't put a V on the device on it. As Lavoy walked away, Alahelm saw him pulling the V off the award. That's when I started pursuing it, Alahelm said. So that one that was that V that was one that when he got it, he decided he might want to take it off. Vietnam vets claim 9 Purple Heart launches year-long investigation into his military records. This was by Ben Benton from Chicago Times. Chattanooga Times. And I know Chattanooga, I've been there and can't see it. Jeez. Note, the Time Free Press in November 2016 published a story that included information about Vietnam veteran Stephen D. Holloway, who was speaking at a Veterans Day event in Pikeville, Tennessee, and claimed to be the most decorated veteran of the Vietnam War. Holloway's public claims were challenged by veterans of Vietnam and other conflicts, and the Times Free Press has spent more than a year investigating his military record. To date, Holloway maintained his claims are accurate, though few of his medals and awards have convincing documentations. Well, tough tonight. Silver Star, Bronze Star, Prisoner of War in Vietnam, 9 Purple Hearts. Sounds so extraordinary, but that's what 69-year-old Vietnam veteran Stephen Douglas Holloway claims. For 3 of those claims, the Hudson resident is DD-214. That's the official document every military veteran who serves is given when discharged from duty, backs it up. Let me read this carefully now, because I don't want you to miss it. One of Holloway's multiple DD-214s anyway. In Holloway's Purple Heart claims that are true, veterans who study military awards decoration documents and records say he would be the most decorated service member to serve in the Vietnam War. 9 Purple Hearts. But so far, the Times Free Press has been unable to verify any of these claims through military channels or through Holloway himself. On November 10th, 2016, the Times Free Press interviewed Holloway by telephone before he spoke at dedication ceremonies at the new Veterans Park in Pikeville, Tennessee. Holloway said he spent the morning talking with students at Bledsoe County Elementary School about the upcoming Veterans Day and his military service. In the first interview, the Nebraska native said he was Airborne Special Forces. He was a U.S. 101st Airborne, reaching the rank of major. That's what a major's, the oak leaf clover there. And later was a prisoner of war captured by the Viet Cong. That was how Holloway was introduced at the dedication when he also claimed to be a DMZ tunnel rat. Now, here's a man who gets up in front of the public, dedicating this memorial park, and he's introduced as a POW, a major, 9 Purple Hearts, and so forth. And you know that anything he said, the people just absorbed it, and even though it was all lies, and then went home and told everybody about this wonderful hero they met. Holloway said nothing in his short speech about his Purple Hearts or other medals, but he praised fellow veterans for their sacrifices and thanked those who turned out. But in an interview the previous day, Holloway said he also worked for an agency that he couldn't talk about. Anytime that someone says, I work for an agency that I cannot talk about, right there, you better start backing away because the bull, you know what, is going to get deep. Okay. There's a few out there, but there ain't that many of them. He also claimed he earned more than 50 medals in all, including a second Silver Star, 3 Army Combination Medals, 3 presidential citations, and scores of others. I've got 57 medals, Holloway proudly proclaimed, remarking that some were pinned to his chest by President Lyndon B. Johnson himself. And I hated President Johnson, Holloway said. Johnson's the one who gave me these. He pokes you every time he puts them on. But not all those 50 plus medals were listed in a DD 214 and other documents obtained by the Times Free Press from the National Personnel Records Center, part of the National Archives. And there's President Johnson pinning a medal on somebody, but we're going to say it's Holloway. Okay. Holloway's claim of earning 9 Purple Hearts is far too impressive to overlook. That means a man has been wounded 9 times in combat. You do not normally get the Purple Heart for getting a splinter. You got to be in combat. But also too easy to believe for anyone not familiar with the military jargon or how rare it is for anyone to earn such multiple medals. To receive a Purple Heart, one must be wounded in or killed in combat. That don't mean you stump your toe. That means you drew blood. Pinocchio's nose is getting long there. The day the story ran, and for days afterwards, more than a dozen veterans from the Chattanooga area and across the nation challenged Holloway's claims. Holloway and a family member asked the Times Free Press for a retraction of the portion of the story, but claiming he was a POW. So he did admit that he wasn't a POW. But all that metal is still there. An audio recording of Holloway's interview contains several minutes of Holloway describing details of his torture at the hands of a couple of slant-eyed looking people, his weight loss, and 8 fellow captives. Holloway, however, accused the newspaper of making it up. Folks, today when you say something, somebody's recording it somewhere. So it's hard to come back and say you didn't say it. The official documents draw as much scrutiny from veterans as Holloway's claims. A primary release papers, the DD 214 is given to all military service members when they are discharged. Holloway has 2 DD 14s served, filed in the National Archives for his first enlistment. They're identical, except one lists the Purple Heart Awards and the other does not. Okay? In other words, the one that's official, you get the idea it doesn't list them, and then somebody sent an adjustment. And I wonder who sent that. Holloway has at least these 2 and possibly as many as 4 DD 214s on file with the National Personnel Records Center that bear the same dates and other similar details of his record, but with a startling difference. One of the National Archives copies and a matching copy provided to the Times Free Press by family members states Holloway received a National Defense Service Medal, a Vietnam Service Medal, and a Vietnam Campaign Medal. Guess what, folks? If you land in Vietnam, you get those 3 medals just for showing up. You ain't got to do nothing else while you're there. You just show up and they give you those. But Holloway says, and another DD 214 filed with the National Archives states he also earned those 9 Purple Hearts, the bronze and silver stars, and an Army Combination Medal for Valor. Holloway has verbally claimed far more medals than those. As you can see there, the stack of DD 214s. Give you an idea. There's 9 of those. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them there. Both DD 214s for his first enlistment say Holloway worked as a supply clerk and was involved in managing traffic, but don't describe a combat position. Nothing wrong with being a supply clerk, but you don't get 9 Purple Hearts. You don't get the Silver Star. There is at least one more DD 214 for Holloway's second tour of duty. He signed up for a 4-year stint but was discharged after a year. But those military records were apparently part of a records requested by another government agency and have been unavailable for months. In other words, somebody else seems to be investigating him for his second tour, so they don't have that. Holloway's DD-214 bearing 9 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star ARCOM, which is the Army Combination Medal with V device, Silver Star is suspicious for 2 reasons. The wording is incorrect nomenclature. So not only that it's written up a certain way, they use kind of a template to write these things up. Full military declarations, the claim of 9 Purple Hearts is outrageously high, said Bruce Kendrick, a member of the Ernie Powell chapter of 1945 of the Military Order of the Purple Hearts. He's not 1945. That's the number of the chapter. Kendrick said the incorrect nomenclature raises red flags because the document should read Purple Heart with 1 silver oak leaf cluster and 3 bronze oak leaf clusters. That's kind of suspicious there in itself. And Kendrick doesn't mind being asked for a proof of his awards, he said. Most veterans don't. Holloway initially offered to provide a copy of his DD-214, but had never produced it after repeated requests. When Holloway was contacted in mid-June and again in November, as seeking documentation of his Purple Heart citations and other awards, he didn't offer proof. He offered excuses. I'd have to look, Holloway says. I threw away when I came back from Nam. I threw everything away. So I got a few things I'll have to do. After being told that Kendrick and others believe he faked the DD-14s bearing the long list of awards, Holloway dodged an answer. The paperwork from the National Archives held copies of 2 jackets, 2 to 1 inch jackets, manila documented holders with an index listing some of the awards in handwritten and typewritten entries. Handwritten? These entries match wording on the DD-214 that Kendrick points out. But although the 2 to 1 inch includes all 9 Purple Hearts, the box for listing wounds is empty, despite Holloway's claims of being wounded in combat 9 times. So somebody wrote in there that he got 9 Purple Hearts, but they didn't tell how he got those Purple Hearts. The Times Free Press recently submitted a follow-up request in an attempt to gather remaining records. A fake Purple Heart claim flies in the face of the people who have legitimately received them. And you see the Purple Heart kind of fading out there. Asked he was lying about his record, Holloway bristled. No, and I'm getting tired of talking to you about it actually. News at the 2016 Veterans Day event keynote speaker was being challenged on his military record left the veterans in Pikeville almost at a loss. Ray Evans and John Hargis, 2 former members of the Bledsoe County Veterans Park Board of Directors and the U.S. military veterans themselves, said they believed Holloway when he told them about his military record. Holloway produced an award-laden DD-214 to prove his claims, they said. Hargis was shocked, and especially since he had seen the DD-214 and believed Holloway's verbally claims of being a DMZ tunnel rat and a prisoner of war. And that's someone climbing down and wants a tunnel rat getting ready to go down in a tunnel. And there's 9 Purple Hearts. John Hargis said he believed Holloway and didn't question the document he showed them. Evans was also stunned. I thought he was telling the truth, he said. I accepted him his word. In November, as another Veterans Day passed, Holloway still not proven his claims. He said he was being treated for prostate cancer, was in line for knee placement surgery, and had kidney failure and bleeding behind his eyes, and he was going blind. And so leave me alone. Did he maintain his claims in the Purple Hearts? Yes. Just leave me alone and let me get this stuff done, and I will do it for you, Holloway said. The Times Free Press extended an ongoing offer to seek the documentation with Holloway's permission, but he declined. He don't want them to do it. No, because you can't find nothing about me, do you? He said. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You're not finding nothing about me. Why is that? I don't know, he said. Okay. Now, remember the 9 Purple Hearts he had? There's only one person that's been awarded 9 Purple Hearts. His name was Albert L. Ireland. He was a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps, and he has officially been awarded 9 Purple Hearts. No one else in history has said Kendrick, who received the Purple Heart 3 times and has the document to prove it. Albert L. Ireland, a staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, was awarded was wounded 5 times during World War II in the Pacific Theater and 4 times during the Korean War. His receiving 9 Purple Hearts is the second most awarded. Curry T. Haynes got 10 to a single individual in the United States Armed Forces. This guy was in 2 different wars to get 9. But this gentleman, Curry T. Haynes, the holder of more Purple Hearts than any soldier in American history, with a total of 10. And you, but then I threw this guy in. I just thought it was so good that we're gonna get back to this guy's Purple Hearts. Let's see, he's got the Commando Green Beret. He's got the Commando badge, not to be worn with civilian clothing. He's got the gold braided cord and worn by aide-de-camp or senior officers. A unit badge should be worn on shoulder epithet. Combat infantry badge worn upside down on the wrong side. Made up badges, and some of the badges he's got there on his arm there's made up. He has gold wings of an armor's badge. He has from ribbons and so forth from different countries, incorrectly worn without medals. On his sleeve, sergeant stripes. Did not hold, and it did not hold his rank. Himes was convicted for wearing these medals, and it was not awarded. And he was not awarded. An Australian Active Service Medal, Vietnam Medal, Australian Service Medal, Individual Cross of Gallantry with Palm, Republic of Vietnam Combat Medal. Okay, big time hero there. Okay, let's get back to the real guy. What we got there? Let's talk about President Lyndon Baines Johnson and his stolen valor. The President of the United States. LBJ's Medal for Valor was a sham. Julian Borger in Washington, Friday the 6th, July 2001. For most of his political life, Lyndon Baines Johnson wore a Second World War military decoration for valor under fire despite never having seen combat. An investigation broadcast on CNN revealed LBJ was awarded the Silver Star, the 3rd highest U.S. combat medal for a 1942 fact-finding mission over the Pacific while he was a Texas congressman and acting lieutenant commander in the Navy. Okay, let me read that to you again. In a 1942 fact-finding mission over the Pacific while he was a Texas congressman and acting lieutenant commander. The citation issued in the name of General Douglas MacArthur said the plane, a B-56 bomber, was intercepted by 8 hostile fighters and that Johnson evidenced coolness. In fact, according to surviving members of the crew, the plane developed mechanical problems before reaching its target and never came under fire. No other crew member received a medal for the mission. In other words, all the other people on there never got nothing. The biographer of LBJ, Robert Dalick, said the medal was the outcome of a deal with General MacArthur under which Johnson was honored in return for a pledge that he would lobby the president, FDR, to provide a greater resources for the Southwest Pacific Theater. That's a lot of valor to lobby the president there. But see what a crazy world. Now look at this guy. They had to leather his thing. Let's see. He's got 8 of them. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Under investigation, Nevin O'Donoghue. Top row. Let's see if I can get where I can. Distinguished Service Cross, Distinguished Service Medal, the Australian Active Service Medal, 1945 to 75. 4 is a Vietnam Medal. 5, 6, and 7 Australian Active Service Medals. 8 is the Interact East Time Medal. International East Time. I don't know what that one is. Never heard of it. The second row is his Afghanistan medal. His 2 is his Iraq medal. And 3 is his Australian Service Medal. I guess that if you wear medals from other countries, people don't recognize them and they look better that way.
Did we ever fight in Australia? I don't know.
I know, nothing I know of. There was some Australians did a fantastic job in Vietnam, but he ain't Australian. This is another one of my favorites. He lied about being a veteran and defrauded VA. But South Carolina man gets short prison sentence who not once but twice claimed to have served in combat in order to claim VA benefits. He claimed to have served in the Navy. He claimed to have experienced combat during the Vietnam War. He claimed to have suffered injuries and trauma, receiving 2 Purple Hearts for his service. None of the South Carolina man's claims were true. Keith Hudson pleaded guilty to defrauding the government of close to $200,000, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office. On Tuesday, the Charleston man received a prison sentence, U.S. Attorney Lance Crick reported. And this was in the News and Observer not too far long ago. Crick said that Judge Richard M. Gergel sentenced Hudson to a 1-year split sentence, 6 months incarceration in the Bureau of Prisoners, and 6 months home confinement for $200,000. Where's his DD-214? That is 1/20th of the possible time Hudson could have served behind bars. He faced the possibility of a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison, according to U.S. Navy, U.S. Attorney's Office. But see, that's not the best of it. It will actually be less than that, according to Hudson's attorney, who said the 70-year-old underwent 3 months psychiatric evaluation that will count as time served. Hudson was also ordered to pay $297,000 in restitution, according to Click. In June, Hudson pleaded guilty in federal court to defrauding the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs of $197,237. McClatchy reported that Hudson falsified a report where he represented that he was in the Navy and saw combat as a medic, suffering wounds and other trauma. He received 2 Purple Hearts during his service from 1967 and 1971. That, folks, is 2 times. 2 times he's gone into the VA and got money, and nobody seemed to have checked. An investigation by the Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General revealed the report was forged and false, according to the U.S. Attorney. In the award section, it stated that he received a combat medic badge. However, this is an award which is only given for service in the United States Army. The United States Army reported, and in the form stated, Mr. Hudson was served the Fleet Marine Force Medal with Marine Device. There is no such medal. So he was in the Navy, but he received the Army Combat Medic, and then he received the Fleet Marine Force Medal, which doesn't exist. Hudson never served in the military, and he held a variety of jobs in New York and Maine at the time. He claimed to see combat in Vietnam, according to the investigation. Hudson was prosecuted for the same scheme in Connecticut in 2005 and entered the pretrial diversion program, the U.S. Attorney General's office stated. This is a particularly awful type of white-collar crime, U.S. Attorney Sherry Lyndon Lyden said at News Reverse. Veterans' health benefits for those who served our nation in the military. The VA has limited number of physicians and resources. There is not much to spare. Twice, the man went to VA in different states. It just blows you away. Steve Alec, phony Vietnam veteran, phony POW. You can see in the picture that he's wearing a Vietnam veteran's t-shirt as well as a Vietnam veteran's cap. And the caption says that he's a Vietnam veteran and a POW. Not even close. He spent less than 4 weeks in the Air Force in 1974. He does have a National Defense Service Medal in his record, though even though his enlisted service began the day after eligibility ended for the award. So yeah, he doesn't even deserve the one except by clerical error. So the one thing he does have, he didn't even deserve. Senator candidate and Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke also ran on his Vietnam War record, claiming he participated in rice drops behind enemy lines for the CIA. Why is everybody blaming the CIA? Real Vietnam veterans exposed him. Duke's only military service, it turned out, consisted of a brief membership in the ROTC at Louisiana State University, where authorities kicked him out when Duke began airing his beliefs. Iowa Senator and later presidential candidate Tom Harkins boasted that he had flown at F-4s and F-8s on combat air patrols and photo reconnaissance support missions in Vietnam. No, wait, it was combat sorties over Cuba, he corrected himself when challenged by Senator Barry Goldwater. Harkins finally acknowledged that he had never seen combat, that his military experience consisted of ferrying damaged aircraft for repairs from Japan to Philippines. They're out there everywhere. Even clerks sometimes succumb to the temptation to glorify themselves instead of God. This was another one that just blows me away. In 1990, Major Gary Probst, a popular chaplain with the 1st Special Forces Group at Fort Lewis in Tacoma, Washington, claimed he served in Vietnam as a Green Beret and an Army Ranger. A chest full of medals, including the Special Forces Badge, the Vietnam Campaign Ribbon, the Marine Corps Expeditionary Medal, backed up Probst's claims. When it was discovered that his entire resume was a fantasy, Probst claimed he lied for the Lord. See, his phony heroics, he explained, allowed him to gain trust of his flock. So the more lies he told, the more they trusted him, which made his fibs a good and helpful thing. His supporters disagreed. Probst was court-martialed and dishonorably discharged. Folks, if you're going to lie, do not lie to the Rangers and the Special Forces. They're not good guys to lie to. Okay? And everybody, isn't Dan Rather the one that said that World War II people were the greatest nation or something? Okay, renowned reporter Dan Rather in Bias, the book about CBS by former CBS reporter Bernard Goldberg. The author describes telling Rather about a soon-to-be published article citing a CBS news reporter as a particular erroneous example of left-wing bias. To Goldberg's amazement, Rather's voice started quivering, and he told me how in his young days he had signed up with the Marines, not once, but twice. Again, Burkett comes to the rescue. You remember the Stolen Valor book. Comes to the rescue with the truth. Rather signed up with the Marines only once and never got through Marine recruit training because he couldn't do the physical activity, Burkett says. And he notes that Rather was discharged less than 4 months later on May 11, 1954, for being medically unfit. And yet, Rather has been known to brag about his career in the Marine Corps. His, 3-4 months? Rather has made such a big deal of this. I'm a Marine thing. This is like a guy who flunks out of Harvard running around saying he graduated from Harvard. You're not a Marine until you get out of the basic training, and Rather never did. Even worse, the network anchor who ferociously attacked both Vice President Dan Quayle and President George W. Bush for avoiding Vietnam service took steps to avoid service in the Korean War. While a student at Sam Houston University in the 1950s, Rather joined the Army Reserve, thus avoiding the possibility of being drafted. Burkett notes by the time Rather graduated, the Korean War was history. The second the Korean War was over and he wasn't in jeopardy anymore, he dropped out of the Army Reserve. That's when he enlisted in the Marine Corps. It's not quite the same thing as a wannabe, but real Vietnam veterans have people approach them with, I wanted to go to Vietnam, or I am now that I'm sorry I missed it. This is an editorial from me, folks. Now I believe that some, and great minority, did want to go to Vietnam. How many of these I wish I had actually went into the military? If you really wanted to go to Vietnam, all you had to do was join. That was one of the prerequisites. 9 million men and women served in the military during the time of the Vietnam War, but only less than 3 million actually served in Vietnam. Twice as many who served did not go to Vietnam, but they served with honor and could be called to Vietnam at any time. So those who say, I wanted to or wish I had, but did not serve, I feel you're almost as bad as those who did not serve or served and claim medals and valor earned by others who are full of excrement. Okay. To me, another form of stolen valor is a war protester that claims they ended the war early and did it for the troops. They protested for the troops because they loved us troops. In 1969, the draft changed to the lottery system. Up until that, it was through the draft, and there's a big difference between the lottery and the draft. The draft ended in 1969, and the war is unjust, killing civilians, making monsters of the American military. Patriotic American protesters suddenly seemed less intense in their fervor. In other words, they were out there talking about the war was unjust and how we were killing civilians and raping women and old men and babies and so forth. But that just kind of went away when the lottery came along. In other words, the draft is over. I will most likely not have to serve, so let's party and get on with our lives. As the opportunity to be drafted into the military was lessened, there I don't want to go, so let's protest the terrible war. Lessons of bureaucrat became non-existent. For those who truly believed the war was wrong, I was fighting for their right to do so. I don't understand their thinking process, but it was their right. Duh. I would like to point out to the protest groups, the communists watched you on the news also. They had TVs in Vietnam, especially North Vietnam. Did you realize that? They used you and your actions in so many ways. Ask a POW how they use your actions against the POWs. The communists also used you in the propaganda with their own people and military to keep their morale up and justify continuing the war. They were losing so many of their own people. When the people left from North Vietnam to come to South and fight for the communists, it was pretty much known they probably would never come home. But in order to do that, they showed how the American people were fighting it. Yes, the American war protesters extended the war, not shortened it. Because when Nixon had the Christmas bombings and Hanoi was ready to come to the peace table, but the war protesters raised so much hell that they decided to continue on. The communists killed as many during this unjust war where we killed so many people. The communists killed as many or more of their own people after the war and were killed by all sides during the war. I asked the protesters to talk with Vietnam refugees who lost their country, their identity, and any personal wealth to the communists. What do they think about the American military? This is wannabe and stolen valor. This is some of the people coming home from there. That's some of the people who are coming home in caskets. That's the POWs coming home. That's some of the wounded. And that's the 58,000 some people who are on the wall. That's why the wannabes and the stolen valor is so despicable. They're taking away from these men and women who are on the wall. You can't be much more despicable than that. Okay? While the act of stolen valor is truly despicable, act with consequences far beyond a wannabe and need to be exposed. But there's a problem out there, and we're running along, so I'm going to tell you about the problem. There's a lot of people right now that's almost a game. They're looking for people who they claim to be stolen valor. There's so many out there. So it's almost like a vigilante hunt. And it's not always out there, guys. You don't always know what medals or what uniforms they're having. Different services, different times. It's a different. Be careful that you don't embarrass yourself and another veteran when if you go out there and start claiming they had stolen valor. Do some investigating. The outing trend reached its most violent manner when Marine Michael Delphin was approached and embarked by an unidentified member of the Air Force and accused of being a fake. Sergeant Delphin, who is separated from service, who was out of the service, was asked for his ID, which looks different than an active duty ID. The lack of knowledge displayed by his accuser led to a physical altercation, which ended in Sergeant Delphin having a broken leg and a broken jaw. All that came about two veterans fighting each other, but one not understanding the nomenclature of the other. So do what, look, keep an eye on them and so forth, but don't be careful how you go out there and attack other veterans, because you're going to make a total idiot out of yourself and embarrass the other veteran. Bottom line, know what to look for, know what you asked for, and know what you are actually presented. There's no need to get violent and act unproportional now that stolen value is actually a crime. We have the facts on our side. So please, be careful out there. There's a lot of websites out there that you can go and get this information. The search for fake Vietnam veterans among actual Vietnam veterans has become almost a game. This discretion and common sense, which is hard to come by, needs to be used at all times. If you have doubts about the status of a person, check them out before embarrassing them yourself. If you have a doubt, you butter off to keep your mouth shut and do the investigation. Thank you for tuning in tonight, and it's kind of funny just sitting here and looking at some of the ways. I'm going to do that. I know I'm running over long, but I just want to tell you the best ways to spawn a Vietnam veteran. His gun contact ribbon has a V on it. Chances are he's not a veteran if he's got good tongue metal with Valor on it. Says the government lost his service record so they won't have to reveal the secret mission he was on, which is why he can't wear his Medal of Honor. His 12 rows of ribbons included the World War I Victory Medal. He's a Vietnam vet. Modestly claims he served with the SOG. Everybody, if you ain't a Navy SEAL, you're a SOG. That's a Special Forces Special Operations Group in Vietnam. Boy, I've met so many of those. Has a harrowing story of how his first day in country, he had to kill 2 gooks walking point on patrol into Cambodia. Can't seem to remember what unit he served with below the division level. In other words, I was with the 101st, but what company, and so forth. He just can't seem to remember that. Says he enlisted in the Air Force, but was trained at the Marine Corps basic training at Camp Lejeune by Marine drill sergeants for special services with the SEALs. Okay. It appears to have been born about 1965. And is a Vietnam veteran. His MOS is bandsman, which is kind of funny because I remember a guy that was a Vietnam vet that was a bandsman that never saw Vietnam. Was just a cover for the secret missions he was running in both North Korea and North Vietnam. I understand Wayne better now. The only reason that his DD-214 says he was in the Marine Corps band because he was doing these secret missions. Start telling you about the atrocities he committed. Can't remember his MOS, the name of anywhere or anyone who served with or which sea ranch had the best big can main meals. You show him your John Wayne, he doesn't know what it is. And I'm not going to tell you what the John Wayne is because that would ruin the secret. The reason the other POWs never heard of him, he was held in a separate camp because he knew too much. Okay, this is intended as humor for vets, but I've come across pathetic people with 5 of these clues, really. And this was posted by Targeted Marines. Again, thank you very much for being the show tonight. I hope you didn't. I think it's a ball game on someplace tonight. Always, again, thank you for tuning in to the Lesson Vietnam show. Hopefully you were entertained and learned something about the Vietnam War and those involved. Our mission here is to tell it like it is. Our next show will be 13th of March with a guest to be announced later. I'm working on one specifically, maybe another one if not. If you're in the Triangle area of North Carolina, I invite you to the monthly POWMIA ceremony on Saturday, the 2nd of March at 12 o'clock noon at the Vietnam Memorials on the state Capitol grounds. And for the month of March, there's a lot of different opportunities out here for you to go to, which I'm going to tell you at the first show. 29th of March is the National Vietnam Veterans Day. And again, thank you very much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on March the 13th. Good night.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and deltaforce.net.